The Terps should beat Northwestern.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 Sports and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. The Terps have a ton of advantages against this Northwestern Wildcats team. The Terps travel over there to Northwestern at 12 o'clock tomorrow for a huge game, in a game that I said yesterday was a must-win game. We're on a 2-game losing streak right now after starting the year hot and thinking we were kind of the stuff. I said it too. I thought we were the stuff coming into the year when we were 5-0. I thought we should have been top 25. I've talked about this. It's a must win this game against Northwestern Wildcats. There's no other way to put it. On this 2-game losing streak, we cannot lose to a team like Northwestern to reach our goal of the year to get to 9 wins overall. But especially against a team that's less talented, where we have a ton of advantages. And I'm going to tell you about some of those advantages that the Maryland Terrapins have over this Northwestern team. First of all, I want to talk about running the ball. Northwestern does not stop the run well at all. They've given up big gains to a lot of different teams, and I seem like I come on here every week and I feel like I say, we can run the ball against this team. They don't really stop the run well. And what do? We end up doing usually what we do every single week. We pass the ball. But like what I said on the last podcast, what I said yesterday, Northwestern's strength in their defense, which hasn't been bad. Their defense hasn't been bad at all. Their offense can't really score, but their defense hasn't been bad at all. But their strength of their defense is stopping the pass. They're top 15 in allowing passing yards per game. In terms of the yardage they give up in passing yards per game. They're top 15 in the country in that, and they're top 5 in the Big Ten. They do a good job of stopping the pass, and they have some really good DBs back there, but they are absolutely acceptable to the run. We can definitely run the ball on this Northwestern team. Let's look at the stats. Northwestern is 99th in the country in running yards per game. They average 100, or other teams average 172 rushing yards per game against them. And if you go through some of the teams that have played them, they have given up a lot of yardage to. Against Duke. Duke's a really good team. They're a top 20 team, and a part of the reason Duke is able to get a lot of rushing yards against a Northwestern type of team is because their quarterback, Leonard, is a big-time dual-threat quarterback. He's going to be an NFL guy, and a big part of that is because of the athleticism he brings. But overall, Duke got 268 rushing yards versus Northwestern. Minnesota, if we look at the Minnesota game, they put up 34 points against Northwestern, which is a good bit of points. That's a lot of points. 34, definitely you can win with 34 points. It's a very good mark if you're hitting 34 points. And so you might look at a 34-point game from Minnesota, and if you don't know anything about the game, you might think, oh, Minnesota probably passed the ball pretty well. They probably had a lot of passing yards. They probably were able to move the ball well. Maybe they were able to run the ball too, but they probably were at least pretty balanced and able to do both. They probably didn't slug it out if they had 34 points. It was probably more of a combination of the pass and the run. I'm sure they had some downfield shots with 34 points. Not really. The passing game had 153 yards, which isn't a lot at all. Talia sometimes gets that in a half pretty easily, or even he can get that at the end of the quarter with a couple of shots that Talia takes. But overall, 153 passing yards in a game where you get 34 points is not a lot. So this is another example. Minnesota is another example of their strength of their back end and their secondary and stopping the pass. But what did Minnesota do really well against Northwestern? They ran the ball 244 yards. 244 yards they gave up to Minnesota. That's the reason Minnesota was able to score 34 points. Minnesota is no high-powered offense. They're not a team that's going to average usually 34, 35, 36, 37 points per game. That's not what Minnesota is. But when Minnesota can run the ball for 244 yards throughout the game and only pass the ball for 153 yards and win that game, that's challenging to do, but that tells me that Northwestern is a team that we want to run the ball on. And Minnesota's leading rusher had 31 carries for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm just going to say this. Our leading rusher, Roman Hemby, and our best running back, who's really talented, was second on Mel Kiper's big board in terms of running backs, in terms of going into the NFL draft next year. I don't think that'll stay the same because he's definitely regressed in terms of statistics overall in the last couple of weeks. But overall, he was the number 2 on Mel Kiper's board for a reason. But I don't think we will ever give Roman Hemby 31 carries in a game. We just won't do it. One reason is we like to rotate the other guys in, and Antoine Littleton, Colby McDonald. We like to give everyone some time. But still, Roman Hemby will never get to 31 carries. But I would love to see him get to 20 maybe carries against this Northwestern team. Do I think that'll happen? Probably not. Or I would like to see our running back room as a whole get a lot of carries. Will that happen? Maybe. But I think that it's kind of shows, the Minnesota game shows that we don't have to necessarily be throwing the ball a ton, because that's not what Northwestern is going to. That's not going to be a successful game plan against Northwestern. It'll probably still work. If we throw the ball, honestly, a lot, it'll probably still work because Northwestern, they just aren't a very good team overall. And even though I'm talking about their secondary being pretty good, we probably would still be able to run the ball on them. Another advantage that we have, other than running the ball, is Northwestern cannot get off the field. They rank bottom in the country in 3rd and 4th down percentage. And guess what the Terps are? The Terps are top 2 in the Big Ten on 3rd and 4th down. So Northwestern, a big part of the reason a lot of their games have been close and they have been losses, this team can't get off the field. And we've talked about their secondary being really good overall, but I don't think their pass rush is anything special. I feel pretty comfortable even if we get into this. Isn't a measure of success. This isn't exactly what we want to do. But if we get to 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, I'm not going to be like, oh, we want to be there. We want to have a bunch of 3rd and longs. But we can definitely pick some of those up. This team cannot get off the field on 3rd and 4th down. And if we're on the 45-yard line, short distance, and we're driving, instead of kicking the field goal, I think in the game plan it has to say it's okay to go for it on this team on 4th down, because I think we have clearly the advantage there in terms of the statistics. So that's one thing I'm looking out for, to see if they neutralize that at all, or if we're going to overall be able to convert on 3rd and 4th down. So the two big things that I think we have advantages on are running the ball and 4th down and 3rd down efficiency and getting off the field for them, and us staying on the field. And those are two things that I think we can take advantage of, that I'm seeing straight away in the statistics of the game. But I think the Terps offense versus the Northwestern offense, I don't think Northwestern can compete with us on that side of the ball. I'll tell you about that after this ad. Now time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by the Athletic Brewing Company. Much like Tagovailoa, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. You don't have to worry about hangovers. I've talked to many people in the LOCKEDON community, and they say they taste great. They're the fastest growing non-alcoholic brewery in the U.S., so get on board. You can find Athletic Brewing Co.'s non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use Locked On to get 15% off your first online order. That's Locked On at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer. Exclusion and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company. Fit for all times. Have you ever wanted to go to a last-minute game like a Maryland Terrapins game, but finding tickets is hard? I have been there before. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Download the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The Terps offense clearly is better than the Northwestern offense, and I don't think the Northwestern offense can stick and put up as many points even close to the amount that the Terps offense can. When I look at these two teams and we talk about offenses, what does it all start with always? It always starts with the quarterback. It's just the most important position on the field. Everybody knows that in football. It might be the most important position in all of sports. It might be the hardest position of all the sports. Teams are dependent on quarterback. It's what makes your offense good. Maybe a little bit less so in college, but in the NFL and in college too, a quarterback makes or breaks your team. And when you have a good quarterback, you have a good team. That's a saying. And I'm looking at the quarterback comparison between Northwestern and Maryland, and there's a huge difference. Northwestern starter is out. Ben Bryant was the normal starter, and he's been out for a little bit now. And Brendan Sullivan is now the starter for Northwestern. And honestly, he hasn't been that good. Against Howard, he went 13 of 18 for 131 yards and 72% completion. That's a solid game. But Howard is not a good team. That is a terrible team that they should have blown out, and they were only able to score 20 points against Howard. Howard is terrible. So, and then I look at his game against Nebraska, and it's just not all that special. 12 of 23 for 176 yards and 52% completion, and they put up 7 points. Clearly, they do not trust him because he's throwing the ball not very many times a game. He's throwing the ball about 18 times per game, 23 times per game against Nebraska. That averages to about 20. Compared to Maryland throws the ball about 35 times per game. That's what Tlia averages, and that's first in the Big Ten. So you can see the difference in styles. Maryland wants to throw the ball a lot, even though I think we have the advantage in the run game. And Northwestern, what do they want to do? They want to run the ball more and control the clock and make it into a defensive kind of ugly, mushy game plan where they can tough it out and make it close and hopefully find a way to win at the end. But that's why I think Northwestern's offense can't compete with us. They put up about as many passing yards as we have in their whole game passing yard statistics, and how many passing yards they throw per game are about what we throw per half with Talia. So Northwestern, I don't think they can stick with their offense in terms of quarterback play, in terms of passing the ball. And if we look at Northwestern's wide receiver room, Bryce Kurtz, a pretty good player, 423 yards on the season and 27 receptions. And then Cam Johnson's their second receiver, who has 339 yards. I'm not worried about anybody outside of those two guys. Their third guy on the list has 149 yards, and their fourth guy, Joseph Hinman, has 136 yards. So they're top heavy, and I've talked about it. Our secondary is really good overall. I think it's one of the best in the Big Ten, and I think we're getting Tarheeb still back and Dante Trader back. So watch out for us to improve on how we looked against Illinois. But this is what I'm thinking about how this is going to go. They're very top heavy at receiver, like I said. I like how that plays for our secondary. I think we're going to be able to really not worry about a ton of guys out there, and maybe we can shade coverage over to their top wide receiver side a lot because we're not scared about their third guy getting open from the slot. Or we can put a safety over the top of Kurtz, their top receiver, and we just don't have to be worried. Or overall, we can blitz them and create some pressure against their offensive line because we're not really worried about the receiver room a ton. And I think if you look at it compared to our receiver room, which I think is one of the best in the Big Ten, it doesn't even compare to what we have. We have 5 guys on our team that have above 180 yards on the team. Our 5th wide receiver, Roman Hemby, who's our starting running back, has more yardage than their 3rd leading receiver. Our 5th wide receiver on the roster, Roman Hemby, who doesn't even play a ton of snaps, doesn't play all the snaps, plays a lot of snaps, don't get me wrong, but doesn't play. They love to rotate that running room. He doesn't play every snap. Roman Hemby would be 3rd on their team in receiving currently. So that tells me Ty Felton and Caden Prather and Ja'Shawn Jones compared to their top guys, it shouldn't be close. Maryland should create many explosive plays. It's going to be hard against Northwestern defense. We cannot underestimate that. Northwestern secondary is very good, and it's been playing like a top team in the country or a top unit in the country. Will that keep up against us? I think this is one of their best tests of the year so far in terms of throwing the ball. They haven't played a ton of teams that love to throw the ball, and Maryland kind of contradicts what the normal Big Ten is about in terms of Maryland. Like I said, we're first in the Big Ten in throwing the ball at 35 times per game. When you think of Big Ten, what do you think of? You think of run game. You think of defense. You think of offensive lines. You think of tough games, tough overall players, and you think of smashing the ball down teams' throats. You think of the Michigans of the world who have really good defenses and 2 good running backs, and you think of Penn State who always usually has a good defense and runs the ball really well. You think of those type of teams, and then you got obviously a team like Ohio State that can throw the ball all over the place. But when you think of the Minnesotas and the Nebraskas, you think of Big Ten smash the ball. But that's not what Maryland does. And Northwestern hasn't gone against many teams that love to throw the ball. So their secondary hasn't been tested that much, and they're going to get tested against us. So overall, I think our receivers create many more explosive plays, and we have advantage also in our running back being a really big receiver in the receiving game. But I think we should have the advantage there in creating big plays. And sometimes the game is measured. A lot of people say this. The game is going to come down to turnovers and explosive plays. Sometimes it just comes down to those 2 measures. But that's usually when the teams are really close in talent. I don't think Northwestern has the talent that we have. But overall, still, if we're creating more explosive plays, I don't think there's a way to beat us. And then you got to look at maybe the most important unit on the field outside of quarterback, offensive line. Maryland's offensive line is nothing special, nothing to write home about, nothing that's going to be amazing. And we're looking at Maryland's offensive line as one of the best in the country. No, it's not that. But Northwestern's offensive line is terrible. Maryland's defensive line should have a day against these guys. Northwestern has allowed 4 or more sacks in half of their games. In 2 games, they've had 7+ sacks. They've continued to try different combinations, but none of them have worked. And we know the Terps defensive line has started to play really well. So I'm saying the Maryland offensive line, it's nothing crazy, it's nothing great, but they've played well enough. And they've played about as good as I think I could have asked for a lot of the year. And I'm going to say that our offensive line is definitely an advantage over the Northwestern team. So why does this matter? On big 3rd downs, Northwestern's going to have trouble blocking us, and that's going to make it so they can't keep up with our offense because our offense in 3rd and 7s can convert. Northwestern's offense on 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s. I don't know if they're going to be able to convert with their offensive line. So overall, I'm looking at receiver. I'm looking at quarterback. I'm looking at offensive line. And I don't think Northwestern can stick with this Maryland Terrapin team overall with the explosive plays of the team and be able to outscore us because we're going to put up some points. That's one thing that we've done pretty well. We've been able to put up some points, and Northwestern hasn't. So I don't think they can stick with our offense. Will the Terps cover the spread? What is the spread? I'll tell you about that after this ad from PrizePicks. Testing my skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned fantasy sports platform in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege for a first-time deposit. The Terps will cover the spread against Northwestern. The spread right now currently is at 13.5 points. And I kind of like that number for the Terps. I think we win big. I don't think this team can stick with us at all. I think number one reason why we cover this spread, we're coming off the bye. We're getting some of our guys back. We're getting Dante Treater back. We're getting Tarheeb Still back. We're getting Bullock back. I think we're getting Corey Dutchess back. I'm expecting a lot of those guys to play and to be back, and I think that's what is going to happen. So what that tells me, we're back to being a pretty scary team overall. Without those guys, our team does take a hit. It takes a pretty big hit in terms of not having our receiving tight end that can create matchup nightmares, not having one of the best up-and-coming safeties in the Big Ten in Dante Treater, not having a starting offensive lineman in Corey Bullock. Those guys being out definitely hurt us, but and you cannot forget about Tarheeb Still. I don't want to forget about Tarheeb Still, one of the best corners in the country. Those guys being out hurt us in the back end. It hurt us on offense, hurt us on defense. It hurt us in terms of leadership on the team. And having those guys back, I think we're in a much better position. And this line has gone down. It started at 14.5, I want to say. It went down a whole point. And I like Maryland at 13.5 a lot more than I like them at 14.5. I think the Terps cover. I think we win pretty big. This is the big thing that I think about Northwestern. I just don't think they can score the ball. If you look back at their games, like they barely can put up 20 against Howard. They put up 7 against Nebraska. I don't think they can score enough points to stick with us. Now, if they're scoring easily and it becomes a shootout or something like that, then we're going to have some concern and we're going to have a problem, because then I'm going to have a lot of concern about that Maryland defense overall and what they can do. And I'm going to be coming on here like, maybe our defense isn't as good as I thought we could be, because I said on here that I think our defense can take another step, and it starts this week against Northwestern. We need this game going into Penn State week. And if our defense doesn't look good against Northwestern, we're going to have some problems. But overall, I totally expect them to. I expect us – one of the biggest reasons I think we'll cover the spread is because, like I said, Northwestern, I don't think they can score enough points. I think our pass rush is going to be able to get to Northwestern rather easily. I think we're going to be able to get to the passer easily. I think we're going to be able to stop them pretty easily, and I expect us to do that well, because I don't think their offensive line, it's been pretty terrible this year. I did a bunch of research, and a bunch of people on the Northwestern websites, like their FB Nation page, says their offensive line has been bad this year. Their backup quarterback is in. He doesn't create explosive plays. I'm just looking at it at every category. The only thing I'm concerned about is that their secondary plays really well, and that one of their guys has created a lot of turnovers and interceptions. So that's one thing that I'm concerned about overall, because, Talia, he can be a little bit turnover prone at times. But overall, I still don't see their secondary just stopping us, because I don't think their pass rush is very good. Their defense has played fine, but overall, I think this is one of the best offenses they've faced so far, and some of the best athletes on the outside they've faced so far. So I just don't think that Northwestern will cover the spread. Now, what do I think my score prediction will be? I think it's going to be something in the boat of like 31 to 14, 13 points. That's what I'm going to say. 31 to 13. Northwestern, we kind of maybe they stick around a little bit in the first half, but like not really. We have the game in our control, but overall we win the game pretty easily. But I can't wait to see the game. And I will be on here on a post-game show at about, what will it be? About 3:45 talking about the Terps win against Northwestern. Knock on wood that we win the game. But thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Like and subscribe. Like I said, we'll be back here on today or tomorrow to talk about the Northwestern post-game show. Also, basketball season is coming soon. We'll be doing post-game shows for that every time that we can. And overall, we'll be talking about Maryland basketball every week too, starting next week. I mean, we've been doing it this week also, but can't wait for basketball season. And Dairy Queen news is supposed to drop soon. So as soon as that happens, I will drop a podcast as soon as possible. But please like and subscribe. And thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.